as we get into the meat of the subject, when you hear the word Marxist, please replace it with Nazi. Similarly, when I mention Stalin, think Hitler. Also, quickly, go on you. Remind people quickly about the worst dictators in history. Post a league table. They can then reacquaint themselves with the regimes they led, the human misery they unleashed, often against their own citizens. Those 2 points now sitting between your ears. Let's now look at a map of Canterbury University here in Christchurch. The 2 questionable named buildings sit side by side. Coincidental, I'm sure. Now, here they are in the flesh. The Elsie Locke building. And Karl Popper. I'll start with Karl, seeing his name is probably less familiar to most Kiwis compared with the Locke clan. Austrian Karl Popper was one of the most influential and revered modern philosophers. In his later life, he would go on to champion Western liberal values. One of his most famous quotes is this one, an ass-biting quote, if there ever was one, given his own dalliances with Marxism in his younger days. Psst, did you think about Nazis when I said that? Long before Hitler and the Anschluss of Austria, Vienna had earned the nickname Red Vienna, a hotbed of communism. Popper worked for free at their headquarters and took part in the street battles on Team Left, then became disillusioned with the extreme left and extreme right. By the time Hitler and the Nazis had come to power, he was in a tricky situation, both the political undesirable and Jewish. Popper needed to flee the coup or risk time in a concentration camp. New Zealand granted him refuge. He took up a position at Canterbury University in 1937, teaching philosophy for the duration of the war. Immediately upon arriving, he began slating the university for its setup and lack of resources. Wrote to friends complaining about the lack of intellectual rigour he found on campus. Whilst Kiwis were off fighting the world's most famous Austrian, Popper was bemoaning about the pay. Immediately he began looking for a new job, which he found at the Sydney University before the war ended, only for that to fall through. Finally getting a position he thought he was worthy of at the London School of Economics in 1947. I will give you a further summation on Popper at the end of this video, but it's fair to say he thought New Zealand and Canterbury University to be a backwater. None of this you'll read on the University of Canterbury website, I might add. Onwards, to be charitable to a local, bestowed a similar honour. June the 22nd, 1941, must have come as a bit of a blow to Elsie Locke and her fellow New Zealand communists. Hitler had begun the invasion of Russia. He had also invaded Poland earlier, of course, along with Stalin's Red Army 2 years prior. Only Elsie didn't see Poland in 1941 as an invasion like most people. Her take was, to say the least, not shared by many. Picture now replacing Red Army with Hitler's army, Poland with Netherlands. Up until Operation Barbarossa, New Zealand's communists had wanted New Zealand to declare itself neutral, not get involved with the war, which they saw as being one between imperialistic and capitalistic states. There was now a complete turnaround in the way they thought. They were in this war against fascism, boots and all. Only, rather than supply England with raw materials, these hardliners went up and down the country politicking for New Zealand to get in behind Stalin's Russia. Upon Stalin's death in 1953, Locke wrote to the new Secretary-General of the Soviet Union, addressing Khrushchev as comrade and lavishing praise on the achievements of Marxism, along, of course, with her condolences. campaigned more than once for New Zealand to forget about democracy, and this time in 1950, using ironically the democratic system. What to make of all of this? Both Popper and Locke are not exactly role models. Starting with Popper, an intellectual par excellence, he was fine writing about the war between left and right, democracies and dictatorships. When the real fight, one involving guns, tanks and bombers, took place, people with far less skin in the game than him, say a farmer from Otago, began dying for a cause. Popper, well, he hightailed it away from the pointy end, as far away as he could get, the safety of New Zealand. A cushy job for the duration at the Canterbury University. Then, almost immediately after arriving, began lambasting the country and the institution, bitching about the state of the courses, got miffed at the lack of German language books in the library, the drabness of New Zealand society. The only thing he did seem to like was the New Zealand bush. Buggered off from the country the first opportunity he could. Nowhere will you find him referred to as a New Zealander. He died a British citizen. I can see why Canterbury University would want to coattail one of the most famous and well-known modern philosophers. One that thought that your institution was intellectually bereft seems rather strange and peculiar. Clearly the tricky bit about working for the Austrian Communist Party headquarters isn't seen in the same light as, say, if it had been the Nazi headquarters. A totally unworthy choice is the best I can say about him. Same as granting him an honorary degree in 1973. Frankly, doesn't say much about those taking history at Canterbury. They could have well pointed out his thoughts about his hosts, just like I have. As to Locke, I'm well aware she had an epiphany after Hungary was invaded. The excesses of Stalin became too convincing for her to ignore. She would go on to campaign for world peace, write children's books, took anti-American and anti-Western rhetoric in New Zealand to a new level. Locke, though, never gave up on her Marxist beliefs. This was a woman who was seen as a subversive by the government of the day. Even a Labour one. Wanted to destroy New Zealand's very way of life. Worshipped a butcher that put Hitler to shame. Her name needs to be erased. A more worthy recipient found. Perhaps the varsity in question can take the same rigorous approach it took to the comedic film star Charlie Chaplin. A stage show about his life being canned by the varsity a couple of years ago. I think the term is more correctly cancelled. All because of his predatory womanising. Chaplin's lampooning of Hitler and the Great Dictator is, in my view, cinematic gold. Peculiar the varsity took such a heavy-handed attitude to a play about his life, focusing in on one aspect, whilst blindly ignoring the clear excesses of Popper and Locke, both alumni of Canterbury. And those two somehow got buildings named in perpetuity in their honour. Seems totally wrong to me. At best, highly selective. Canterbury University has some explaining to do. Let me know what you think in the comments. Bye for now.